So the next video I want to do is about clinical depression. Clinical depression is something that it affects everyone, can affect anyone. It doesn't discriminate gender, ethnicity, anything like that. And I just want to also say that clinical depression is different from just being depressed. I think I have a unique perspective on this because I had 31 years of relative mental health. And, we all experience depression. We all get punched in the gut sometimes. We can lose a loved one. We can experience the loss of a job or financial difficulty. These things can definitely make us feel down. But that is not what clinical depression is. Clinical depression has a host of physical symptoms and very, very scary mental health symptoms that can, I'm sure, unfortunately, have led to some people not being able to cope to the point where, they may have hurt themselves. So this video, I want to cover what my symptoms were with my worst episode of clinical depression. I want to start with the physical symptoms. Everything seemed off. Everything seemed off. Things looked off. To try to understand it, maybe if you only got 2 or 3 hours of sleep in a day and you're forced to be up and you notice that things don't look right, you're dizzy, things, and you're like, well, of course, I only got 2 or 3 hours of sleep. That's why I feel this way. I'll go to sleep, get a good night's rest, and I'll feel better. But depression, you're like that all the time. For me, it was like that all the time. Things didn't look right. Things seemed off. It was almost like a dark, almost like you're in another dimension. I know that for people who've had clinical depression, they probably know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, maybe you think that I'm a Looney Tune, but that is how it seems. Also, you will have, it feels like clinical depression feels like an emotional death. So things that you normally that you normally enjoy doing or that mean a lot to you, with clinical depression, you get no joy from them. For me personally, I enjoy sports. I enjoy watching sports. I enjoy playing sports. When I was clinically depressed, I could do neither because they brought me no joy. I didn't get the feeling that I normally got from it. And so those are small things, right? But then even the huge things in your life, the most important things in your life, your family, the way you feel for your spouse, for your children, you don't feel the way you should. For parents out there, you know how much you love your kids, right? But imagine if your body, if the electrical impulses that your brain was receiving, you weren't able to get that joy that you normally get. And it can be really scary because, people with depression and anxiety, both, generally are people who care a lot, who care deeply about things. So when you don't, and you don't have that feeling, then the depression is really, really difficult to deal with. And it can really interfere with your job, with your marriage, with other relationships, because you're not feeling the way that you should feel. Also, bouts of crying. And I wasn't much of a crier throughout my first 31 years, but when I did cry, I would usually feel better afterwards. It's like, I think, and a lot of people have told me that sometimes when you cry afterwards, you'll feel better. Well, with depression, you don't feel better after you cry. Instead, you feel like you're getting sucked into a vortex. You feel like you're getting sucked into a vortex, a black hole of despair. And after I cried during my depressive episodes, I felt even more despondent. So it's a really, really uncomfortable and scary, scary feeling, clinical depression. You'll also have, I had bouts of crying. I had that feeling of unreality. And also just the physical side of it. You'll feel extremely tired a lot of the time with no motivation, none. You can sleep days away. You can get up just to go to the bathroom and to eat maybe. And then other times you will not be able to sleep. I think at my worst, I think I probably went a whole week and maybe got 4 or 5 hours of sleep for the whole week. And that just drives the depression deeper and escalates if you have any other mental health issues, because, you need your rest in order for your mind to recuperate. So it's a vicious cycle that gets going, and, that's why some of the coping strategies I'll give you are so important to do, because without them, it could lead you to a place that you can't recover from. So there's that. And as far as how it affects the way you feel about others, clinical depression will make it so the people that you love the most in your life, you don't feel that bond that you normally felt, that you normally feel, that is how you really feel about them. So I remember when I was at my worst, even hugging my wife or my kids did not give the feeling that it normally gives. And that's scary, because intellectually how much you love these people, but you're not feeling that feeling. And then you might cry for no reason at all. Another thing that I experienced was bouts of anger, and they would come out of the blue as well. And it wasn't precipitated by some, thought. It would just come out. It's like you're emotionally broken, just completely broken down when you experience clinical depression. And that's why it's so important to do these next steps. I'm trying to think if I left off any of the symptoms. There's been so many symptoms over the years. I'm just trying to differentiate in my mind between anxiety and depression, and they frequently go together. But just that despair, that despondent feeling where things feel like they're never going to be better, and that there's no meaning to anything that you do because you get no joy or any feeling out of it. So now let me get to coping strategies. And this is extremely important, especially for men out there, because I know how a lot of us have been programmed. A lot of us have been told from the time we're young, and also just inherently feel like it's our job to be strong and to take care of things. And depression isn't something you can see with your physical eyes. So it may feel like weakness, but the first thing you need to do is you need to get a professional help. You need to go see a professional, a mental health professional. That's the first thing you need to do when you're not getting joy out of things you normally get joy out of, and you have that feeling that you're being emotionally sucked into a black hole. You get no joy out of any things that normally have given you joy for your whole life. You know that you're clinically depressed. So you need to seek professional help. Now think about this. Think about what your choice is. You can try to be tough, right? And not get help. And where might that lead you? If you let this fester, it's going to hurt your relationships with your family, with people you love. It's going to hurt your job performance. And the alternative is to get help. Maybe even you will need pharmaceutical intervention, right? That's a possibility. It's a real possibility. But whatever the case, you'll get help, and eventually you'll feel better, and you won't undo all the great things that you've done and accomplished. in your relationships and in, your work or whatever. So first thing is get professional help. Another key strategy that worked for me and that helps when I start to feel this way again is keep your routines. You're not going to feel the way you should feel. So it's hard. It's almost like fake it until you make it. But keep your routines with what you're doing as far as work, relationships, exercise. Try to keep them, even if it feels like you're an actor in a movie. Because eventually your feelings are going to fix themselves. Maybe not 100%, but even without any intervention at all, you're not always going to feel this way. You're not. The depression will lessen. That's depression just by its nature. Clinical depression ebbs and flows. So you're not always going to feel this way. So you need to remember that and separate your intellectual, what you know about how you feel, about what's important to you, who's important to you, from how your emotions, how your mental health issue is allowing you to feel. Where, I remember at my worst, I couldn't even feel, as I've already mentioned, the way I should feel about my family. So that's an important thing. Also, make sure you try to get your sleep and try to get your exercise and try to eat in a balanced way. I always say this in all the videos, and it might sound like, ho-hum, yeah, that sounds great, but it's really some of the most important stuff. And it's not gonna, the thing that's tough with clinical depression is you're not gonna feel the way you should feel when you exercise. Food isn't gonna taste as good. It's not gonna taste like it normally should. Your exercise, you're not going to get that little endorphin boost. You're not going to feel it. Not when you're deeply clinically depressed. Not when you're in that black hole. You won't feel it. But do it. Keep doing those things. And try to get sleep. Try. Make sure that you're at least trying to turn in at a consistent time and sleep for a consistent time. You'll want to maybe sleep a day away or a week away. Or you'll feel like you can't sleep at all and you might just lay there and toss and turn, but at least go through the motions. Because eventually, maybe with pharmaceutical intervention, maybe just with the ebbs and flows of clinical depression, you will start to feel, your emotions will start to come back. You'll start to feel appropriately. Things won't look off, won't look dark and gloomy. And dark and gloomy so understates the way that you feel. And again, you people who are clinically depressed or have been clinically depressed, you know what I'm talking about. It's like complete emotional death. And you're not gonna always feel this way. And you don't want to allow the great things in your life to slip out of your hand because you have this mental health issue. So get the help you need. You may very well need pharmaceutical intervention. And then as you do start to feel better, this is really important because if you're clinically depressed, it'd be very easy to lose your job, your family, become agoraphobic. There were times when that was a real issue for me, where I had an extremely my job is very close to my home, and it was like climbing the south face of Everest just to drive to my job. And when you're clinically depressed, that is not unusual. But keep your routines. You're not always going to feel the way you feel now. Your feelings will return. You'll get your soul back, because it feels like almost like your soul's been stolen when you're clinically depressed. And then as you start to push through, do more, don't stay status quo. If you have become maybe housebound or at least limited in what you do, what you choose to do with your activities, maybe you haven't been going to the grocery store. Go to the grocery store as you start to feel better. That's with all of these mental health issues. Don't be content to stay where they have brought you when you're at your worst. Stretch out. You have to, because that's how you're proving to yourself that this isn't the way it's going to stay. That's how you're proving to yourself that it's a mental health issue and not something that you really need to be afraid of. And, that is, that with all of these mental health issues, pushing through is important. But that gets to one last thing I want to mention. Don't overdo it either. So it's kind of like when you're not maybe a proficient swimmer and you're at that pool that has the, thing where the water's getting deeper. Until you know you can swim in the deep end, don't just dive in the deep end. So if you've been housebound because of your depression, probably not a great idea to go to a large stadium or, something like that. That would be too much, even if you are feeling a little better. But, incrementally, do more, keep doing more, and let how you feel determine. So do what you are capable of doing and allow yourself to have bad days, and you'll get through it. Rely on the people in your life who love you, the help from a mental health professional. Keep your routines, the things that you know are good for you, with diet, exercise, and sleep, and you will get through it. It can be very scary, very debilitating, but you will get through it. So thank you so much for your viewing these videos. If you know anybody out there who's going through this, please tell them about this so that they know that there's someone else out there who's experiencing clinical depression, anxiety, intrusive thought, OCD. They're not alone. It's not unusual. It's not weakness. But it does need to be managed. It does need to be dealt with, and you are going to have to seek help in order to get through it. Thank you so much. Like, share, subscribe. I really appreciate the support so far for the channel. And until my next video, take care.